Today's topic is how to get young people interested in learning economics. Hello, everyone. Good to be with you once again. Today we have with us Ashish Kulkarni, who used to teach economics, but is now trying to figure out how to get young students interested in economics. He's become a blogger and so on. Let's hear from him. Over to you, Ashish.
Subodh, thank you so much for inviting me. I look forward to this conversation. And you couldn't have described both the topic that I want to talk about today and, in a sense, the purpose of my career for the rest of my life. It is, like you said, to get more people interested in wanting to learn economics. Actually, even that is, in a sense, incomplete. I just want to figure out how to get more people interested in learning, period. But since my own professional qualification is in economics, and since I'm most comfortable teaching that particular subject, I've restricted myself to getting more people be interested in learning economics. And the reason I say more interested in learning economics rather than becoming, in a sense, a better teacher is because one of the blog posts that I'd written on my blog was titled, "There is no Say's Law in Teaching Economics." And what that means is we live in an age where the supply of tools by which one can learn economics is virtually inexhaustible. You can spend an entire lifetime on YouTube. You can spend multiple lifetimes on YouTube, and you wouldn't run out of content by which you can learn economics better. But weirdly, we also seem to be living in an era where students don't seem to want to learn, at least in universities in India. It's both a broad statement and a strong one, but having taught in universities in India for the last 15 years or so, I can personally say firsthand that we somehow seem to excel at killing curiosity in students. How to stop that from happening is something I'm very interested in achieving. Okay. So that's in effect what I want to speak about today.
All right, please, let's hear it. I mean, what I can say is that when I was young, we probably had no curiosity at all in any subject. It was not just economics. College is for fun, what the hell. But anyway, you tell me how it is.
And I completely agree with that sentiment as well. At that particular age, broadly speaking, 18 to 24, not only is it important to have fun, I would argue the major point of life at that stage in your life is indeed to have fun.
Yeah, okay.
But also, I don't think there is any other time that is more appropriate to build the foundations of your career, to build the foundations of whatever it is that you plan to spend the rest of your life on. Not only do you have the time, but you also have the energy. And best of all, you have something approaching a tabula rasa, an empty mind with which you can fill whatever it is that you want to fill it with. And in the case of economics, I think we don't get our students to want to read enough, to want to view enough, to want to be able to listen enough to whatever it is that we are putting out as content, whether it is this particular podcast, other podcasts, books, movies, videos, whatever it may be. How to get more people remain curious and how to achieve it while in college. Or to put another way, I don't think we are good enough in terms of our teaching within colleges and universities to help students retain their curiosity.
Okay.
And this happens, I would argue, across three broad reasons. The first is I don't think we do a good enough job of teaching, and that includes me myself. I'm very much a part of this profession. Second, I don't think we think the correct way about how to conduct examinations in the 21st century. And third, I don't think we make our syllabus relevant enough for challenges that students today will face in a professional context once they graduate from college.
All right.
So these would be the three things I will want to focus on.
These are pretty deadly things.
True, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go with it.
All right, so which of the three would you like to begin with?
No, you go ahead, you choose. I'm listener.
All right, okay. So let's speak about the teaching bit first. And because I have taught in Indian universities for the vast majority of my career, I'll want to focus on Indian universities. Perhaps this applies in other contexts as well. I'm not so sure. My first bone of contention with Indian universities is we spend far too much time telling students to listen to lectures in classes. Whether you take my own example when I was a master's student at the Berkeley Institute in Pune, or whether it is the way master's courses are run today, typically a master's program will involve anywhere between 4 to, I'm not joking about this, 8 hours of classroom lectures per day. And this across at least 5 days a week, sometimes 6 days. To expect a student to devote the time to read extensively after this, to expect a student to want to not just read, but also reflect about whatever has been read, and then to participate meaningfully in classes is, let's face it, never going to happen.
Okay.
Both you and I are not going to be able to focus for more than 3 to 4 hours of listening to somebody else passively. It doesn't exhaust one physically, but it does leave one with a certain sense of mental exhaustion. And after that, expecting them to focus on reading, whether for pleasure or for a formal assignment, just doesn't happen.
Okay.
And you spoke about enjoying yourselves at the age of 18 to 24. You leave even lesser time for that.
Yeah.
So my first contention is lesser in-person teaching and more time in universities for reflection.
Yeah. Okay.
So that would be one. Second, in terms of examinations, and I'm going to sound maybe a bit heretical, if that's the appropriate word, but Indian universities do not focus enough upon changing examinations given the world that we live in. Closed book examinations are all well and good, and in certain cases they are very necessary. But to have all of our examinations in an Indian university be closed book examinations, where rote memorization is not just necessary but is the name of the game,
Yeah.
fails our students in the sense that we teach them to memorize questions, we don't teach them to ask questions. And in the internet enabled world of ours, asking the right question is a more important skill rather than knowing the answer.
Okay.
And the third is our syllabi simply don't reflect what we need our students to know. This could be because we ask them to memorize definitions in musty old textbooks. This could be
Yeah.
because we ask them to read lengthy papers. This could be because we don't include enough podcasts in a video podcast such as yours, for example, in learning. But think about what makes for an interesting discussion. So the fact that you describe yourself as a participatory listener, part of the reason I would argue you do it is because a discussion is much better for both learning and for conversation
Yeah.
than a simple one-way monologue.
Yeah.
But 8-hour lectures in a university are very much monologues delivered by the professor.
Yeah.
So as a consequence of all of these things, we end up doing disservice to our students.
Yeah. Okay. Let me share with you my experience as a teacher. Okay.
Mhm.
I did teach very conventional courses from 1981 to 88 in a B-level university in Washington, D.C. And after that, I was self-employed and working as a consultant on applied work.
Mhm.
And there I found that my colleagues who weren't economists had no understanding of economics. And I decided that it was because we did not know how to teach them.
Mhm.
We just did not know how to teach them. And the profession was failing those who take econ courses but don't want to become economists.
Right.
So I had left the university on good terms. So I went back there and after 20 years, and I'll come to the point there that, look,
Mhm.
guys, you don't know how to teach non-economists, and I do. So they
Right.
say, how do you know? I said, look, I work with them. You sit in your offices. You do the same thing every year. What do you know? You don't know anything. I know. So they said, how will you do it? I said, first thing is to get rid of the textbooks.
Yes.
I will write my own lectures from scratch. And I will not do undergraduates. Rather, I will do master students outside the Department of Economics who take a course which is meant for them. I'll
Right.
teach that course. So they said, okay, try it, see if it works. So I did
Right.
write my own lectures and I did teach that course for several years. And then I also taught some other courses which I had never taught before. That's not the point. And the whole thing was that we are trying to make everybody an economist, where everybody, like a master's or a PhD and so on. They don't want to be, they just want to. My thought was that I should teach only things that economists know, but are not intuitive to non economists, but are also useful for them to know. Okay.
Right.
So this was my criteria for selecting the topics and all. And then in the end, what happened was, I stopped teaching after several years. And then in the pandemic, the first time in February of 2020, I got there's something that happened. My plan for the next 4 months fell apart and I had spare time. So I wrote a book called Core Economics. And it's available in India. It's available in everywhere. And it's only 9 chapters. It doesn't cover the micro part. Because I thought most people think they understand micro. They think they know supply and demand. You teach them marginal utility and all, they're bored. Say, what the hell? I know this stuff. They don't, but they don't understand macro, and they don't understand labor markets, and they don't understand. So I focused on those. And since you are an economist, the chapter 1 starts with the Akerlof model of
Information asymmetry.
asymmetric information, because I explained there that, look, with very simple model based on assumptions, Akerlof derived insights which are governing the world still today.
Yep.
So economics, people say, oh, it's full of assumptions. I said, look, here are some assumptions. And it's written at 9th grade level. The book is written at, there's a reading scale that you can use. It's written. So, but that's because I was able to go back to that university. They knew that I'm a good teacher. I don't want to be here. And I am ready to put in a lot of effort for very little money. To teach one course, I'm putting in, writing a whole set of lectures. But this is what it will require, that we need a new way of textbooks. I don't know what that will be. I wrote my own version, but I can't imagine that it will happen easily. Just can't imagine that it will happen easily, because we have such an entrenched system in which the teachers themselves are entrenched, and you cannot teach them how to do new things. So you can't say the system, but by the time people have been teaching for 10 years, they're just going to do that. They can't do anything else. So
I agree.
the only way out is to have some video classes or something like that. But the problem is, and when I talked to one of my friends who was a professor of biology, and she said the same thing, that we try to make the intro econ courses as if this person's going to do a PhD in biology. But we don't recognize that there are some people who are not going to go in any degree beyond BA.
Correct.
And for them, it should be different, but who's going to write it?
Yep.
And who's going to approve it? And who's going to say that this is the right thing? Because ultimately, what we are all doing is we follow so-called world leaders, but except they have students who are different, right?
Correct.
You can teach
Correct.
them in any way you like, it doesn't matter. But then we follow the old method. We teach the old textbooks, we teach the old thing. I mean, if you take a textbook today, you can recognize Samuelson's 6th edition of 1960s, right?
Right.
I can recognize it. I say,
Yeah,
wow,
absolutely.
this diagram looks like the same diagram. What the hell is this? So anyway, there is a serious problem, but I don't see the way out of this, because the university system is deeply entrenched, and there's no one who's willing to change, because change is costly. And suddenly, if you change the syllabus, then you get all the teachers up in arms saying, we can't do this because we have to learn everything, new ways of teaching and all. So I'm not that optimistic about it, but the problem, I agree, is real. But to help sort it, I did write that book. I am now in the process of revising it and adding 5 chapters on public policy, so that it becomes core economics and public policy. Because everybody these days is interested in public policy, which they think is more relevant than just dry economics. So I am writing 9 chapters. I'll add 1 chapter on econometrics, 10 chapters on pure economics, and 5 chapters on public policy. So that is my personal effort to solve this problem, but it is not going to solve the problem. It's just my effort.
It's a marginal revolution, as it were.
Well, not a revolution, a snail space crawl. Let's put it that way. But anyway, I'm glad. But what are you doing to solve this?
Well, lots of different things. But before I answer the last question that you raised, if you'll allow me to touch upon some of the points that you spoke about. When it comes to textbooks, my major issue with textbooks is, and this drives me around the bend every time I read a textbook that says this, they'll explain a concept and then towards the end, it'll include a box that says, here's how this concept applies to the real world.
Yeah.
The reason I object to that is because a student isn't interested in the concept. The student is interested in the real world problem. Begin there. Say
Yeah,
that, hey, this is puzzling about the world. And
yeah,
then ask, all right, how does an economist view this problem? How does an
yeah,
economist solve this problem? How does an
yeah,
economist make sure that the problem is efficiently solved?
yeah,
So invert the textbook, begin with the problem and come with the concepts later. Number
yeah,
one. Second, textbooks themselves, in a sense, are outdated in the modern world. And the reason I say that is because textbooks were written precisely because it would be difficult to get a lot of information in one place to begin with before the internet existed.
yeah,
You can have an online, and I would argue you should have an online textbook today rather than a physical copy. But the other reason that I shrivel up and die a little bit at the end of every semester is because students come to me and ask, which textbook should I read for this examination? And the reason this is depressing is because the idea that you can learn an entire subject by reading one textbook is just soul killing.
yeah.
You
Okay,
should read a dozen books, not just one. No
yeah,
matter how good a textbook is, the idea that a subject is mastered by reading one textbook is deeply problematic.
okay,
So
fine.
I always tell my students, you know what, I'm going to be that cranky old professor who's not going to recommend a single textbook.
Okay,
Read whatever you can find and as much of it as possible.
okay,
Now, to come to the issue of how I try to solve this, well, in a sense, I've spoken about it already. Never recommend only one textbook. And in fact, be a little difficult towards your students and say, I'm not going to recommend a single textbook. You figure out what you need to read in order to be able to answer whatever questions I ask of you.
yeah,
One. Second, at the margin, I try and write something interesting every day on my blog.
yeah,
Every day is, in a way, a bit of a misnomer. Not every day of the year do I succeed, but I end up posting about 200 to 250 posts every on an
yeah,
annual basis.
yeah,
And sometimes I recommend not only my own blog posts, but blog posts written by other people. I recommend, so for example, if I'm teaching, say, for example, behavioral finance, I
yeah,
always like to begin a semester of behavioral finance by showing a lovely conversation between Eugene Fama and Richard Thaler.
yeah,
Now, when we were students, the idea that you could have two people who have won the Nobel Prize for effectively saying the exact opposite thing
yeah,
speak to each other about it in our own class would have been the treat of a lifetime. Today,
yes,
students can listen to it on demand,
yes. This is
and there
true.
is no textbook in the world that can better
Yeah, I
this.
mean, I agree with you. You know, I lived through it. Okay, yeah,
Mhm.
I'll summarize it from 1981 to 88 when I was teaching, or say to 94. Only the
Right.
professor had knowledge.
Mhm.
There was no, and you couldn't even go to the library because what to read. Okay, so the
Correct.
professor was the key and the guide and the knowledge for
Yes.
everything, right?
Yes.
But when I went back to teach in 2006,
Mhm.
the knowledge was on the internet,
Correct.
right? So my job was no longer knowledge. My job was now explanation and analysis, right?
100% agree.
So I said,
Yep.
and I could say, hey, I've forgotten. Can you just look it up?
Correct.
In the class, I could say, hey, look it up for me, will you? And in two
Yes.
minutes, the fellow will, that time people didn't have phones, they'll have laptops, they'll look it up and say, oh, it was at this time and these were the details. I said, good. Now we can
Correct.
continue. Okay. Or, I would take a break. And so the knowledge has shifted outside
Yep.
to the internet. And let me say something that the analysis of the past has also shifted by ChatGPT.
Yep.
ChatGPT, I was talking to a dean of a law school the other day. He said, if I ask, not if, he says, when I ask ChatGPT to summarize for me the analysis of a very famous Supreme Court case called Keshav Bharati in the
Of course.
late
Yes.
1960s, he said its summary was better than mine. So that he's also talking about change in teaching.
Right.
The Chat GPT and other AI have already done the equivalent of the analysis, summarization of the analysis of the past. So now
Indeed.
you have to figure out how to. You tell them, look, you find this out. You get the knowledge yourself. You get the summary yourself. Now, what is my job as a professor too? And I think the job is more to motivate and to
Exactly.
inspire rather than to say, listen, there's this diagram of supply and demand, and or this is the analysis of demonetization. Okay, look it up yourself, guys. It's there. Or don't look it up. There's no need. Put it in Chat GPT or whatever it form it is now available. That please summarize for me demonetization. Okay, fine.
Correct.
I'll give you both sides and you have it. So now what is left? That is something that I don't teach anymore, and I don't intend to teach anymore. But this is what the dean and I talked about. He teaches, he's a law school dean in India, that the time of summary of the analysis is also over.
Yeah.
Okay, it's available. So what is left now? I think it's only to inspire and motivate to learn.
To add to, not only do I not disagree, I'm 100% in complete agreement with you. But to add one little point, I think what is more important for us to teach our students these days is the art of critical thinking, knowing when to push back against what ChatGPT has said.
Yeah.
That, hey, you know what, this is what you said, but maybe you're wrong this way. And that only
Yeah.
comes from being able to say to a professor, hey, maybe you're wrong this way.
Yeah. But how do you test the students on it? The signaling feature is also there, no?
Yes.
So anyway, that's a separate issue, but it's really good to know that you are thinking about it. And it is the reality today. If we want the thing is, the students who come to say like Gokhale, they
Mhm.
are near world-class or world-class students
Absolutely.
by
100%.
their background and their skills and their motivation. They can't
Yep.
get into these places without that.
Yep.
But the value added has to be world class and modern. And that's
Absolutely.
where we are not able to do it. So you have to think how to do it, what to do within an examination system that is going to not change. It's too rigid and it's too entrenched, and the cost of change is very high because none of the teachers is willing to change. They've been teaching it for 15 years. There's a marginal change every year. They can handle it. But to have a mass scale realignment of the teachers, it doesn't sound realistic. But still, let's see what you can do in terms of, as I said, it now post GPT, post AI, what is the role of a teacher? How do you add value to these students? That is a big challenge. I don't know the answer because I'm not going to teach anymore, but you are. And you need to find a way to get them to think for themselves, as you said, critical thinking. But the thinking cannot be just the old term paper because the old term paper,
Yeah.
ChatGPT will write the old term paper.
Correct.
So now we live in the post AI, the AI world, and how I don't know how we deal with it. So I'm beginning to think about it, and certainly I'm hoping to have a talk. I hope the dean invites me to continue the conversation, and for law teaching,
Right.
we will see what I can do to help him think. I don't know any answer.
I hope that happens, but in my own personal case, I'm happy to tilt at windmills for the rest of my life in terms of changing examination systems for the better. And I agree with you. Inertia is a very real problem when it comes to examination departments, maybe all over the world, but certainly in India.
All over the world, all over the world. It's the same thing, the textbook is in its seventh edition. The faculty have got used to teaching from that textbook.
Right.
Get them to take a new textbook is like not willing to do a new textbook, even in this conventional style, because the cost of change is very high.
Right.
Cost of change is very high. So it's a fine, I can do this very easily. I have honed it, and I have contributed my 3 lines how to write these words better in these textbooks. Everybody has a group of people who are sending their comments to the author through the
Right.
publisher, that this one was hard to explain to the students, can you look at it? So it's a whole ecosystem of
Ongoing process.
publishing and professor and research assistants and writers. Textbooks are not written by people sitting at home anymore. They are like a movie production. There's a star, and
It's a nice analogy.
there's a whole thing behind them. and the teachers get used to it and they won't change. Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry, but they're used to this. All right. Anyway, that's a pessimistic view of the world, but I hope you're more successful in doing it. And certainly the challenge is post AI. What are you going
absolutely.
to do? How are you going to inspire the students who are coming to you with a lot of background and a lot of skills?
Correct.
Right.
Absolutely.
Let's see if you can figure something out. Maybe we have you 1 year from now and tell us what progress you have made. But before that, anything else you'd like to add?
Um, like the master on my blog says, my one message to everybody is to learn better. Doesn't
Okay.
matter what age you are, doesn't matter where you are in life. If you have learned something new today, it's been a good day, and try and repeat it the next day.
All right. Thank you
Keep
so
at
much.
it.
I have learned to do video. I had never done video till February of this year. Now I have learned to do it in some fashion. I don't know how good it is, but at least I have learned to do something and it's working well. So thank you so much, Ashish. It's great to talk to you. Let's say bye to the viewers. Bye bye, everybody. I'll be back soon with another expert or another young person and or maybe my own opinions. Till then, bye bye. Okay.
Thank you so much, Subodh.